The blue and red lights flashed against the rain-slicked street as Officer Ellie Parker approached the silver sedan. She'd pulled over yet another speeder on Maple Avenue, but something about this one felt different. The man behind the wheel looked exhausted, his eyes carrying the weight of someone fighting battles no one could see. Little did she know, this routine traffic stop would change both their lives forever. As she leaned down to the driver's window, the words slipped out before she could stop them. "If you weren't married, I'd add my number to this ticket." Mark Reynolds gripped the steering wheel tightly, his wedding ring catching the light from the street lamp above. The truth about that ring would shock her, and what happened next would test everything they both believed about second chances. David sat in the back seat, wide-eyed and silent, watching the pretty police officer talk to his dad. At just 8 years old, he'd already experienced more loss than most adults. What he was about to witness would change the course of his young life too. Rain pounded against the windshield as Mark fumbled for his license and registration. "I'm sorry about the speed, officer. My son has a doctor's appointment, and we're running late." Officer Ellie Parker's professional demeanor softened slightly as she glanced at the boy in the back seat. David's small frame was dwarfed by a backpack covered in superhero patches. His eyes, so much like his father's, held a maturity no child should possess. "License and registration, please," she said, her voice gentler than usual. The rain plastered her long blonde hair against her face, but even in the dim light, Mark couldn't help noticing how striking she was, not just physically, with her athletic build and bright blue eyes, but something in her presence radiated both strength and compassion. "Here you go," Mark said, handing over the documents. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he felt an unexpected jolt. It had been so long since he'd felt anything like that. Ellie returned to her patrol car to run his information. In her rearview mirror, she watched as Mark turned to say something to his son, his face animated despite the circumstances. There was something about him, a quiet dignity mixed with vulnerability that intrigued her. Her computer pinged with his record. Clean, except for a parking ticket from 3 years ago. Mark Reynolds, 34, residing on Oak Street. She paused at his marital status, widowed. The wedding band had thrown her off. Something about this man made her want to know more, which was entirely unprofessional and unlike her. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you've ever had an unexpected encounter that changed your life. Returning to his car, she handed back his documents along with the ticket. "I'm giving you a warning this time, Mr. Reynolds. But please be careful, especially with your son in the car." "Thank you, officer." He glanced at her nameplate, Parker. "I appreciate it." Something compelled her to say more. "Everything okay? You seem distracted." Mark hesitated, then gestured toward David. "Today's the anniversary of his mom's passing. 3 years. We're actually heading to the cemetery after his checkup." Ellie's professional facade cracked. "I'm so sorry." She looked at the wedding band he still wore. "That explains the ring." "Yeah," Mark said, twisting it unconsciously. "Can't seem to take it off yet." Before she could stop herself, Ellie leaned down and said quietly, "If you weren't married, I'd add my number to this ticket." Her eyes widened as she realized what she'd said. "I'm sorry, that was completely inappropriate." "I don't know why I'm not," Mark interrupted. "Married, I mean. Not anymore." He looked down at his ring. "Just haven't been able to let go." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of two souls who understood loss. "Dad?" David's voice broke the moment. "Are we still going to be late?" Mark checked his watch. "We should go." Ellie straightened up, professional once more. "Drive safely, Mr. Reynolds." As she watched them drive away, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a terrible mistake, or perhaps the best one of her career. What neither of them realized was that David had been watching the entire exchange with keen interest. For the first time since his mother died, he saw something in his father's eyes that had been missing, a spark. 2 weeks passed, and Mark couldn't get the police officer out of his mind. Her words echoed in his thoughts during quiet moments at work, while making dinner for David, and especially late at night when the house felt emptiest. "Dad, can we get ice cream?" David asked one Saturday afternoon as they drove home from his soccer practice. "Sure, buddy. The usual place?" David nodded enthusiastically, his soccer cleats thumping against the floor mat. They pulled into Scoops, the local ice cream parlor that had been their weekend tradition since before Sarah died. As they stood in line, Mark felt a tap on his shoulder. "Fancy meeting you here, Mr. Reynolds." He turned to find Officer Parker, Ellie, standing behind them in civilian clothes, jeans and a simple white t-shirt that somehow made her look even more striking than her uniform had. "Officer Parker," he said, surprised. "Ellie, please. I'm off duty." She smiled, and Mark noticed a dimple in her left cheek he hadn't seen before. "This is my son, David," Mark said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Hi, David. What flavor are you getting?" Ellie asked, crouching down to his level. "Chocolate chip cookie dough," David answered without hesitation. "It was my mom's favorite too." An awkward silence fell, but Ellie handled it with grace. "That's my favorite too. Great minds think alike." David beamed at her, and Mark felt a rush of gratitude for her easy manner with his son. "Would you like to join us?" Mark found himself asking. "I'd like that," she replied, and the smile she gave him made his heart skip a beat. They sat at a small table outside, David happily demolishing his ice cream while the adults made cautious conversation. "So, what made you become a police officer?" Mark asked. Ellie's expression grew serious. "My brother was killed in a hit-and-run when I was 16. The officers who worked the case were amazing with my family. I wanted to be that person for someone else." Mark nodded, understanding all too well the way tragedy could reshape a life's trajectory. "I'm sorry about your brother." "It was a long time ago," she said, though her eyes suggested the pain was still fresh. "What about you? What do you do?" "I'm an architect. I was working for a big firm in the city, but after Sarah, my wife, passed, I started freelancing from home to be there for David." David looked up at the mention of his mother's name. "Dad designs really cool buildings," he said proudly. "He's making one shaped like a dragon for my Lego city." Ellie laughed, a warm sound that seemed to brighten the air around them. "A dragon, huh? That sounds impressive. It's going to breathe fire and everything," David continued, warming to his subject. As David chattered on about the elaborate Lego world he and his father were building, Mark watched Ellie. She listened to his son with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at his enthusiastic descriptions. It had been so long since anyone had engaged with David this way. Most adults grew uncomfortable around a child who had lost his mother, unsure what to say or how to act. If this story is touching your heart, drop a comment below sharing a special memory with someone who made a difference in your life. Their ice cream outing stretched into an hour, then 2. When David spotted a friend from school across the street at the park, Mark let him go play where they could watch him from their table. "He's a great kid," Ellie said, watching David race around with his friend. "He is," Mark agreed. "He's been through a lot, but he's resilient. More than I am, sometimes." "How did it happen?" Ellie asked softly. "If you don't mind me asking." Mark took a deep breath. He rarely talked about Sarah's death, but something about Ellie made him want to share. "Cancer. It was quick, 6 months from diagnosis to the end. She was 32. Ellie reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry, Mark. The hardest part is watching David grow up without her," he continued. He was only 5 when she died. Sometimes I worry he'll forget her. With a father like you? I doubt that, Ellie said. The way you talk about her, the way you honor her memory, you're keeping her alive for him. Mark felt tears prick at his eyes and blinked them away. Thank you for saying that. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Ellie glanced at her watch. I should probably get going. I have a shift starting soon. Of course, Mark said, trying to hide his disappointment. This was nice. Ellie hesitated, then pulled out her notepad, the same one she used for tickets, and wrote something down. Here's my number. This time I'm actually giving it to you. She smiled, that dimple appearing again. No pressure, but if you and David ever want company for ice cream again. Mark took the paper, his fingers brushing hers. I'd like that. We both would. As they said their goodbyes and Mark called David back from the park, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, possibility. What Mark didn't know was that Ellie had her own demons to face. As she drove to the station for her shift, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Mom, and Ellie's stomach tightened. These calls never brought good news anymore. Hey, Mom, she answered, trying to sound upbeat. Eleanor, your father's had another episode. The doctors want to adjust his medication again. Ellie closed her eyes briefly. Her father's early-onset Alzheimer's had been progressing rapidly over the past year. I'll come by after my shift. How are you holding up? I'm fine, dear. Just tired. Her mother's voice betrayed more than fatigue. It carried the weight of watching her husband of 40 years slowly disappear. I met someone today, Ellie said, hoping to distract her mother with something positive. A single dad and his son. Oh. Interest perked in her mother's voice. Tell me about him. As Ellie described Mark and David, she realized how much the brief encounter had affected her. She hadn't felt this kind of connection with anyone since before her father's diagnosis, when her life had been consumed by caring for her parents and her demanding job. What she didn't tell her mother was how terrified she was of starting something new. How could she bring someone else into the chaos of her life? Especially a man who had already experienced so much loss, with a child who needed stability? Meanwhile, across town, Mark tucked David into bed. Did you have fun today, buddy? David nodded sleepily. I liked Officer Ellie. She laughs at your jokes even when they're not funny. Mark chuckled. Is that so? Dad? David's voice grew serious. Would Mom be mad if you liked someone else? The question caught Mark off guard. What makes you ask that? David shrugged. You looked happy today. Different. And you still wear Mom's ring. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. Your mom loved us both very much. More than anything, she wanted us to be happy. So she wouldn't be mad? No, buddy. She wouldn't be mad. Mark smoothed David's hair back from his forehead. But you know what? Nothing happens unless you're okay with it too. You and me, we're a team. David considered this, then nodded. I think Mom would like Officer Ellie. She's nice, and she likes cookie dough ice cream. High praise indeed, Mark said, smiling. Good night, buddy. I love you. Love you too, Dad. As Mark closed David's door, he pulled out the piece of paper with Ellie's number. For the first time in 3 years, he felt ready to take a step forward. The next morning, as Ellie finished her overnight shift, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. David and I are planning a trip to the aquarium this weekend. There's an extra ticket if you're interested. Mark. A smile spread across her face as she typed her reply, I'd love to. What neither of them realized was that their simple aquarium outing would be tested by challenges neither could anticipate, and that the greatest obstacle to their happiness might be Ellie's own secret fears. If you're invested in Mark and Ellie's journey, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that warm your heart and remind you that second chances are always possible. The aquarium date went better than either of them could have hoped. David raced from exhibit to exhibit, his excitement infectious as he pressed his face against the glass of the shark tank and gasped at the jellyfish display. Mark and Ellie followed at a more leisurely pace, their conversation flowing easily as they shared stories and discovered common interests. "He seems happy," Ellie observed as they watched David naming all the different species of fish to an amused aquarium volunteer. "Happier than I've seen him in a while," Mark agreed. "He's been asking about you all week." "Really?" Ellie felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Really? You made quite an impression with your ice cream preferences and tolerance for bad dad jokes." Ellie laughed. "The jokes aren't that bad." "Now you're just being kind," Mark said, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. As they moved to the touch pool, where visitors could gently feel starfish and sea urchins, Ellie's phone rang. Seeing it was her mother, she excused herself to answer. "Eleanor, you need to come home," her mother said, her voice tight with stress. "Your father wandered off again." The neighbors found him 3 blocks away, confused and upset. "I'll be right there," Ellie promised, her heart sinking. She returned to Mark, who immediately noticed her changed expression. "Everything okay?" "I'm sorry, I have to go. Family emergency." She hesitated, not wanting to burden him with her problems but also not wanting him to think she was making excuses. "My father has Alzheimer's. He's having a difficult day." Understanding filled Mark's eyes. "Of course. Go. Is there anything I can do to help?" The genuine offer touched her. "No, but thank you. I'm sorry to cut this short." "Don't apologize," Mark said gently. "Family comes first. Always." David came running up, his face falling when he realized Ellie was leaving. "You have to go?" Ellie crouched down to his level. "I do, buddy. My dad needs me right now. But I had so much fun today. Will we see you again?" The directness of a child, asking the question Mark was too polite to voice. "I hope so," Ellie said, looking up at Mark. "If that's okay with your dad." "It's definitely okay with me," Mark assured her. As Ellie drove to her parents' house, she felt torn between 2 worlds. The possibility of something new and beautiful with Mark and David, and the reality of her father's deteriorating condition and her mother's increasing need for support. When she arrived, she found her father sitting in his favorite chair, calm now but clearly confused. Her mother looked exhausted, the strain of caregiving etched into the lines of her face. "He keeps asking for Thomas," her mother said quietly, referring to Ellie's long-dead brother. "I don't know whether to correct him anymore." Ellie hugged her mother tightly. "You're doing everything you can, Mom." Later that night, after getting her father settled and making sure her mother had eaten something, Ellie sat on her childhood bed and texted Mark, "Sorry again about today. Everything's stable now. Thank you for understanding." His reply came quickly, "No apologies needed. David and I were wondering if you might like to come over for dinner next Friday? He's insisting on making his specialty. Spaghetti with way too much cheese." Ellie smiled at her phone. "Sounds perfect. I'll bring dessert." Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Ellie spent her free days with Mark and David, movie nights, park outings, cooking disasters that ended in takeout and laughter. On her days off, she helped her mother with her father's care, navigating the healthcare system and trying to find resources to make their lives easier. She kept these worlds separate, not wanting to burden Mark with the reality of her family situation. He knew the basics, that her father was ill, that she helped care for him, but not the extent of the toll it took on her. Mark, too, had his struggles. Though David had taken to Ellie immediately, there were moments when grief ambushed them both. David would sometimes fall silent, staring at his mother's photo on the mantel. Mark would find himself reaching for his phone to tell Sarah something funny David had said, only to remember she wasn't there to receive the message. One evening, after David had gone to bed, Mark and Ellie sat on his back porch, a comfortable silence between them as they watched fireflies dance in the yard. "Can I ask you something?" Ellie said finally, her voice soft in the darkness. "Anything," Mark replied, turning to face her. "How do you do it? Keep going forward when part of you is still looking back." Mark considered her question carefully. "I don't think we ever stop looking back. The people we've lost, they're part of us. But at some point, I realized Sarah wouldn't want us frozen in time. She'd want David to grow up happy, to have new experiences. She'd want me to live, not just exist." He reached for Ellie's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "What about you? How do you handle watching your father change?" Ellie's breath caught. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to ask that question. Some days are harder than others. The worst is when he has a moment of clarity and realizes what's happening to him. The fear in his eyes. She shook her head. But there are good moments too. He still remembers songs from his youth. Sometimes we dance in the living room, and for a few minutes, everything feels normal. Mark squeezed her hand. "You're remarkable, you know that." "I'm just doing what anyone would do," she deflected. "No, you're not. You're balancing a demanding job, caring for your parents, and somehow still finding time to watch terrible sci-fi movies with us." He smiled. "That's extraordinary." For the first time in years, Ellie felt truly seen. She leaned forward and kissed him, a gentle press of lips that held the promise of more. If this story is resonating with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder that love can find us in unexpected places. Their relationship deepened over the following months. Ellie became a fixture in the Reynolds household, her uniform hanging in Mark's closet for the nights she stayed over after late shifts. David thrived with her presence, his nightmares becoming less frequent, his smile more readily given. But as summer turned to fall, the delicate balance Ellie had maintained began to falter. Her father's condition worsened, requiring more of her time and emotional energy. Her mother, stubborn and proud, resisted the suggestion of additional help. "I promised him, in sickness and in health," her mother insisted when Ellie broached the subject of home health care. "I won't have strangers taking care of him." Meanwhile, Mark was offered a major project, designing a community center downtown. It was the kind of opportunity that could relaunch his career, but it would mean longer hours and less flexibility. The strain began to show. Ellie missed David's soccer championship. Mark was late for dinner with Ellie's parents, arriving flustered and apologetic after a meeting ran long. Small irritations that would normally be brushed aside became points of tension. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Ellie had promised to help David with his science project, but her father had a medical emergency that sent him to the hospital. By the time she arrived at Mark's house, 3 hours late and emotionally drained, David was already in bed. "I'm so sorry," she said, collapsing onto Mark's couch. "Dad had a bad reaction to his new medication. They're keeping him overnight for observation." Mark sat beside her, concern etched on his face. "Is he going to be okay?" "They think so." Ellie rubbed her temples, fighting a headache. "But Mom's a wreck. I hated leaving her there, but I promised David." "He understands," Mark assured her, though his voice held a note of something else, disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. "Does he? Because I don't." Ellie stood up, suddenly restless. "I feel like I'm failing everyone. My parents need me. You and David need me. My job needs me. And I can't be everywhere at once." Mark reached for her hand, but she stepped away. Maybe this was a mistake, she said quietly. What was a mistake? Mark's voice was careful, measured. This. Us. I can't give you and David what you deserve, stability, consistency. My life is chaos right now, and that's not fair to either of you. Ellie, we don't need perfect. We just need you. Mark stood, closing the distance between them. Let us help you. You don't have to carry everything alone. You don't understand, Ellie said, tears threatening. My father is dying by inches. Every day, there's less of him left. My mother is burning herself out trying to keep him home. And I'm the only one who can help them. I do understand loss, Mark reminded her gently. And I understand that pushing away the people who love you doesn't make the hard things easier, it just makes you face them alone. The word love hung in the air between them, unacknowledged until now. I can't do this right now, Ellie said, grabbing her jacket. I need some time to think. As she reached the door, Mark called after her. We're not going anywhere, Ellie. When you're ready, we'll be here. The drive home was a blur of rain and tears. Ellie felt as though she were being torn in two, her heart pulling her back to Mark and David, her sense of duty drawing her toward her parents. At home, she found a text from her mother, Dad's resting comfortably. They'll release him tomorrow. Go home and get some sleep, sweetheart. But home didn't feel like her apartment anymore. Home had become Mark's laughter, David's endless questions, movie nights and burnt cookies and the feeling of belonging she'd found with them. For 3 days, Ellie threw herself into work, taking extra shifts and avoiding both her apartment and her parents' house when possible. She ignored Mark's texts, each one more concerned than the last, until finally, he stopped trying. On the 4th day, she arrived at her parents' house to find an unexpected visitor sitting in the kitchen with her mother, David. Officer Ellie, he exclaimed, jumping up to hug her. We brought dinner. Dad made his famous lasagna, and I helped with the garlic bread. Stunned, Ellie looked past David to see Mark emerging from the living room, where her father sat in his recliner. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David missed you, Mark said simply. And I remembered you mentioning that your mom loves Italian food but never has time to cook anymore. Ellie's mother smiled, looking more relaxed than she had in months. Mark has been wonderful. He set up a video call with David's pediatrician, who has a brother specializing in geriatric care. They're going to help us navigate some options for your father. You did that? Ellie asked, turning to Mark. He shrugged. I made a phone call. That's all. But it wasn't all, and they both knew it. While Ellie had been running away from the collision of her worlds, Mark had been finding ways to bring them together. Your dad showed me his military medals, David said excitedly. And he taught me a secret handshake. Ellie glanced into the living room, where her father sat contentedly watching a baseball game. These moments of connection were becoming rare, precious gifts. I thought I was protecting you both, she said quietly to Mark. From all of this. We don't need protection, Ellie. We need you. Mark took her hand. All of you, including the parts that are struggling and scared and overwhelmed. If you're feeling moved by this story of love and resilience, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that remind us of the power of human connection. That night, after a dinner filled with more laughter than her parents' house had heard in years, Ellie walked Mark and David to their car. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For not giving up on me. Never, Mark promised. He hesitated, then added, I love you, Ellie. David and I both do. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Ellie felt the last of her walls crumble. I love you too. Both of you. David, already half asleep in the back seat, mumbled, Does this mean you're coming back? Ellie smiled through her tears. Yes, buddy. I'm coming back. 6 months later, Ellie stood in the small chapel, adjusting her simple white dress. Her father, having a remarkably good day, waited to walk her down the aisle, his eyes clear and proud. "You look beautiful, Eleanor," he said, using her full name as he always had. "Just like your mother on our wedding day." Ellie blinked back tears. "Thanks, Dad." As the music began, she took her father's arm. Through the doors, she could see Mark waiting at the altar, handsome in his dark suit. Beside him stood David, beaming in his role as best man, the ring secure in his pocket. The path that had brought them here hadn't been straight or easy. There had been difficult days, her father's continued decline, the adjustments of blending their lives, the inevitable challenges of loving someone who had known profound loss. But as she walked toward her future, Ellie knew with absolute certainty that some wrong turns led exactly where you were meant to be all along. A speeding ticket, an impulsive comment, and the courage to open her heart had changed everything. Mark's eyes never left hers as she approached. When her father placed her hand in Mark's, the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present, one chapter ending, another beginning. "Ready?" Mark whispered. Ellie nodded, squeezing his hand. "More than ready." Later, at the reception, as David danced with Ellie's mother and Mark twirled Ellie around the floor, she caught sight of her wedding ring catching the light, a simple band that complemented the one Mark still wore on his right hand, honoring Sarah's memory even as they built something new together. "Happy?" Mark asked, pulling her close. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Who would have thought a traffic ticket could lead to this?" Mark laughed. "Best speeding violation of my life." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by friends and family, Ellie reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Life had taught her that love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It was about finding someone who would stand beside you in the storm, who would help you carry your burdens and celebrate your joys. Sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings came from unexpected moments, like a police officer writing a ticket and taking a chance on adding her number. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate love, resilience, and second chances. We'd love to know which country you're watching from. Share in the comments below. Remember, the most meaningful connections often come when we least expect them, and every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. Thank you for joining us on this journey of love and hope.